Hello there, and welcome back to another Shunters Paradise update. This is number 3, so it's been about 2 months since I did the last one, and as you can see from this fabulous thumbnail here, I've done some level designs, got a new wagon, and I've also done some game mechanics. So let's start having a look. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look of how much time I've put into this over the last 2 months. So November, I managed to do about 24 hours, mostly on the actual game mechanics, but a little bit on the mesh work. And then December, again, a little bit more on the mesh work, about 5 hours almost, but a lot more on the actual game mechanics itself. It's about 35 hours, give me a total about 40 hours. That's not bad for December. I've done an extra day or two in January, because I'm filming this a bit late, but generally speaking, that's what we've been doing. It's about 64 hours in total, so bear that in mind when you see the update and see some of the roughness on some of it. So let's jump in. Okay, so one of the major things I've done this time is create a level sequence. So a level can start, it can then you have your play section in the middle, then it identifies the levels completed and it brings up the necessary end of level screens. One of the most important parts of this entire sequence was I wanted to show where the wagons need to go. You can already see in the background I've got a wagon over here, its target is over here, and it's not clear those two marry up. You don't know if it's that wagon or this wagon, and that's partly what I was trying to do. Don't think I've achieved it very well, but let's have a look. So I've got this temporary screen, and it's showing that this wagon here is linked to that kind of highlighted zone. Like I say, this is only early days, I'm not happy with it, and here it's showing the second wagon is linked to the other zone that's down here. So in general it's got the gist of it, it's just not pleasantly done, and this UI is just temporary because I needed something different, and that's all it's doing. The important thing here, it's controlling all the cameras, so they're all hidden, the map's hidden, the controls are hidden, but when I start game they all appear, as you can see here. So if we quickly go off and pick up these wagons, max speed for a 08 isn't max, it's like 20 miles an hour, so this is about right. Right, you can see I've cleaned up a lot of the wagon motion as well, so it's a lot smoother. So if I go off and drop this wagon off the points, you'll see the zone will start to change. Get there slowly, 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 slowly. There. And then I've got an option down here. If I click on the wagon and then pull away, it decouples, which is something I wanted to do. I'm really pleased I managed to do that as well. If we come all the way down here, this kind of represents a very early game level. It's simple, it's quick to do, and it's teaching you the mechanics of like the points and where to put the wagon. So if I pop this in here, there's a little delay and then level's finished. Maybe I should have stopped that from moving. It's going to go off the rails. You can see it's not perfect yet, but that level sequence is in place, and that's what I wanted to do with that. Right, I quickly wanted to show you how that game flow mechanics that's handling the level start sequence works, because it's a good style to use, I feel. So this is the master game flow. This is the thing that's going to control turning objects on and off throughout the entire level, and as you can see, from the very start, wherever the start is, first thing it does, it goes off and shows the wagons, and it just activates all the little bits it needs. But the most important part here is in the update. It goes through each of these game stages, and the first game stage is show wagons and targets, and it's got its update that it sends off, and if the game mode isn't created, it goes off and creates one. If it is created, or after that, it'll update it, But the important thing here is all of my game modes, it's about 4 of them at the moment, they're all in separate classes. So this logic here just controls the main flow and what decides to move on to the next mode. That's all done by this activate. So for example, show wagons and targets is updated constantly until we set it as inactive, and then it cleans itself up, goes on to the next stage. So this knows what the next stage is, and we clear that game mode and it just goes off to the next stage and does the same again, which is set up or use, and then wait until it's unactive, and then goes on to play in, and then play in goes on to end of level. So if we have a quick look at the mode which is show target, the show wagons and targets, it's got initialization where we set up the cameras that we're interested in and also the target, and then on the update it goes through. So the first thing it does, it has a delay, so it's a start delay, and in this it sets the camera up to look at the wagon for about 50 frames, and then once that's down to 0 it moves on to the next bit, which is moving the target, and this is a percentage between the wagon and the target, and it's that ball that moves, and once that's below 0 it's got to its target location. Then we do an end delay to just leave the camera on there for again about 50 frames before it all finishes, and then we go off to the next target, and it'll do that for as many targets as we have, but at the end it will just set the active flag to false, which will force it back onto the main flow that will go on to the next stage. But the idea here is, if I need to look at that code that handles all that logic, it's all within this bit here. I don't have to go, through different classes or anything. I know exactly where it is. There's nothing else in here. It does exactly that. The other example I've got is the play-in one as well. So it's got its update, and it's got this check to see if all the zones are completed, and it literally just goes through all the zones and works out if they're completed or not. And I found that's really good. The idea is, when you're writing code for anything, is try not to just write it like do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Try and write a system, or mechanics if you like, where things are smaller, they're grouped together correctly, but it's expandable. I can add a new game mode in between any of those without any problem. I can go in, I can customize them as needed, and I'm sure I will. It's having this breaking down of your logic and code that saves you time further down the road, or if you've got multiple people working on the project, it comes in handy that way. Another example of a nice thing to do is writing small functions that you know you're going to reuse. So here, when we've got the show the targets, is what it has to do is the target, the ball, and the camera that's looking at that target, they're not in the system at the moment, so we need to create them. But because they could have been created at a previous point, unlikely in this case, I've done a method for myself which is find or create, and I give it the location that it needs to start at, the name of the prefab, and then that's the parent, I think. And if we have a look at find or create, it's incredibly simple. It goes off and it tries to find an object with that name, and if we've created one of these, it will have that name exactly. If we've created more, it'll have the word clone on the end, which I'm not worried about. So here it goes on and finds it. If we do find it, it will just return back with that object so we can use it. But if it can't, it will go off and it will actually create that prefab, and then here we've just got some logic to create the free prefab and get the parent. It means I don't need all these checks in this bit of code here to say, well, is it null, is it empty, do I need it, is it already in the game? It just means everything just is simple to use. I know at the end of the day, after it comes out of this method here, this target's been established and it's in the game and it's got that name. As you can see, I've used it for the camera as well. So it's worth doing these helper methods that allow you to reuse it, and it just speeds up development later, and you don't have to worry about it as much. One of the other areas I've done like placeholder work for is the actual start of the game. So when you first load the game up, you're presented with the option to continue, which is it continues with your current game. If you don't have a current game, it'll give you options for new, but none of that works at the moment. That's not where I was focusing. But something else I also wanted within the options of the menus is to have the option to view the models. You know, I've worked on these models, you get to see them in game. It'd be nice to see if you can like view them separately. And this could be part of a reward system. So the further you go down the game, the further, more models you can see in the viewer. It's a way of just releasing things to the end user, and it makes them feel like they're achieving something. So this is the class 08 we've had for a while. We've got the box van, and then a tanker we've had, but the new model this time is our brake van. These look quite dark in here. It could be because there's an overlay on the screen, I can't be sure. So that's something I do need to sort out. If I go back to the box van, you can see here we've added these coupling chains, and I'll show you those in details in a minute because they change when they get connected. And yeah, it's one at each end, but yeah, you'll see in a minute. The other thing is this class 08. A friend of mine pointed out to me this British Rail logo is wrong in this direction. The arrows are pointed in the wrong direction, where on the other side they're fine. If we swing around, so that way is fine. Now this comes down to the fact I'm mirroring the image. So I now need to do this as a separate plate and then flip the UVs on it. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. I think this is mirrored. It's a mirrored object, but it's just extra kind of details I need to pay attention to because people will spot these kind of things. It's not vital, but it's really nice to get it looking exactly right. Right, I've just popped it into wireframe mode on the scene view so you can get to see the couplings that we've done on this. Now you can see the couplings are hanging down here on both items. These are added at runtime because it's the same coupling design, so why waste it? You can see all my debugs for doing the updates on the line, which is working so much better. Really pleased I've managed to do that. Now if I bring these in, if I do it slowly enough, you'll see there just one of the couplings has updated. So one is still hanging down, the other one is connected. If we stop this for a second, they're not connected perfectly. From a view, most of the time it'll look alright, but I do need to close that gap, make sure it's actually connected better. But again, it's progress. And if I go back to wireframe, actually no, let's do both. So now if I pull the wagon back and stop using the map, I can click on the wagon and it disconnects. And it will stay disconnected for a little time before it reconnects. It gives the time for the player to move away without it automatically recoupling. There. So you can do that while we're moving, and the wagon keeps a little bit of momentum as well. And eventually they'll recouple. Okay, one of the other things I've modelled this time is a little buffer stop. It's just so I can put it on the end of the line. It just gives it a representation of how it's going to look. But in order to model that, I needed to know the exact width of the track to try and get it to fit in place. I mean, it's not perfect. It's in the rails where it shouldn't be. But because this track here is generated on the fly, I didn't have a model to compare it with. So I had a look, and you can export meshes from Unity out, but it's not by default, if you like. So if you go into your package manager and have a look for FBX exporter and import that and put it into your system. So if you select a game object with a mesh, come into game object, you've got some options, so you can export to FBX. That allows you to just purely save that as the XBF object you can take into any 3D packages. Mine was Blender. So that was terribly useful. So keep that in mind if you need to export any meshes, especially the auto-generated kind. Right, as you saw from the thumbnail, I've got this demo level I've been playing with. It's using terrains, it's using a lot of models. I'm just experimenting with the look and feel of each level. This is a possibility. But whilst I was developing that, I actually dropped in a first-person controller so I can literally walk around an environment. And it's quite an experience, really. So you can come in, you can look at wagons, you can look at the shunters, maybe even like climb aboard. So I'm not sure I'll ever do this as a game mechanic, as a game mode, because I'm designing this whole game for Android. I want to keep the controls simple, and having these controls, it's quite a change from the shunter controls. It's doable, it's doable. The other problem with this kind of idea is I've got to do the scenery behind the camera, where currently everything's pretty much from the perspective of a shunter. So all of my models are one way away from the camera. But certainly while I'm developing, I think this mode will come in handy. Allows me to come in and inspect even, like, is the hedge on the ground? Got the buffer stop down here, I've got my points. You can see my texturing. I've just got a little bit of grey where the grass is. Sorry, the grass comes down, a bit of grey where to represent the ballast. There's a buffer stop. There is a collision on that, which is good. Got my fence up here. It just allows me to have a play. And like I said, it's unlikely this will get in the end game. It's just a way for me to experiment and look around these environments. So I'm now back in the shunter for a proper shunting mode, if you like. I think these hill kind of levels are better. They're going to take longer to develop because I need to make sure everything's placed on the hill and the hills aren't too big and the track is flat and the colours of the ballast with the grass. There's a lot more to think about, but I think it's going to be worth it, and it's going to create a nicer environment. It's more varied. It's not all just going to be flat with buildings in the background. So it will slow me down, but it'll be worth it. I think a better game at the end of it. That's what we want. So as ever, thanks for watching. I really appreciate that. Please subscribe if you want to hear more of these stories. I'll be continuing to do these as long as the game is in development, and it will be in development until it's finished, I hope. Yeah, so there you go. That is Shunters Paradise, DevLog 3. Share and enjoy, and thanks again for watching.